It's the Fitness Lab Pittsburgh podcast, a new episode every week. A podcast about movement, part of making your life complete. Fitness Lab Pittsburgh, aka FitLabPGH, brings you interviews with people in the Pittsburgh area who understand movement is part of what makes life complete. Looking for a new movement idea or just want to hear interesting stories about people who make movement a priority? This is the podcast for you. Whether you consider the gym, dojo, or fitness studio your third place, or just want to learn more about movement, activity, and fitness to enhance your life, give FitLabPGH a listen. We interview locals in the Pittsburgh area who make Pittsburgh a great place to move. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or Google Play, or check out our website for other subscription options. Subscribing is free and gives you notifications when we release new episodes. Each podcast episode will be long enough to pique your interest and short enough to hold your attention. Have an idea for an episode? Know somebody we should interview? Or just want to connect with us? Drop us an email, fitlabpgh@gmail.com, or follow us on Twitter or Instagram at fitlabpgh. Already a fan of FitLabPGH? Check out our sister podcast, Moving to Live. Moving to Live is a podcast for movement professionals and amateur aficionados. Moving to Live offers weekly interviews with movement professionals featuring topics from career development to coaching tips and education resources to advice for parents of student athletes. We look forward to hearing from you, and we hope you enjoy our next interview, starting now. FitLabPGH is back with another podcast interview. This time we are in the north side, so I went over a bridge but not through a tunnel to get here today. I have not told today's guest, but there is pressure on him because every time I've done an interview for FitLab Pittsburgh in a coffee shop, it's been a good interview. So we are at Commonplace Coffee in Mexican War Streets, and I'm trusting that this will be a good interview. Our guest today came by way of us stalking or looking at things on social media, and we saw that a land trust popped up with some really cool pictures. We'll find out what a land trust is. It's not a form of a bank, and we're fortunate enough to have Sean Brady, who is, I believe the correct title is Executive Director of Hollow Oak Land Trust.
It's a long name. Hollow Oak.
So the important thing to remember is it is a land trust. It makes lands available for people to do a wide variety of outdoor activities. And before we find out more about the land trust, we want to find a little bit about Sean. But the first thing is people who want to get caught up or dragged in immediately, give us a quick definition of what is a land trust.
Land trust, people are like, trust. Is that a bank? It kind of is a bank, but it's a bank of green space, nature. We protect land. We own land, and we take care of land in perpetuity. So it's actually privately held land. It's like a park, except somebody owns it, not a municipal government or a county or a state. A land trust owns it. That's our mission as a charitable organization, is to protect land.
And we're going to talk more about that in a few minutes, but first we want to find out a little bit about you. As I've mentioned before, the ethos of FitLab Pittsburgh is movement is part of what makes your life complete. And the reason I'm meeting Sean in the north side is he lives up here, but he rides his bike over to Moon Township. So he definitely fits the ethos of movement is part of what makes life complete. I always like to start out our interviews with FitLab Pittsburgh as a non-Pittsburgh native of asking the people we interview, are you a Pittsburgh native? If so, why are you still here? If you're not, why the hell are you here?
Pittsburgh's reputation has improved, I would say. I am a native Pittsburgher. I have lived elsewhere. I lived in New Mexico for a couple of years as a kid. I lived in Washington State as a couple of years as a kid. Both beautiful places. I've gone back to verify as an adult that they really are beautiful, awesome places. But to answer your question, I don't think there's any other city in the United States that's nearly as good as Pittsburgh as a place to live. Incredible diversity of activities here, outdoor activities. I'm an outdoor, frenetically active outdoors person. There are 7 rivers within an hour of Pittsburgh, days and days of paddling on each, tons of fish to catch. I'm a big fly fisherman, so I fish for trout, I fish for walleyes and bass and giant muskies and lots and lots of stuff to do outdoors. Lots of culture, lots of history. It's an incredibly diverse place to live in terms of things to do. Still working on the racial diversity. I think we're lacking there. I think Pittsburgh is essentially the whitest large city in the United States. So still working on that part.
Provo, Utah, maybe?
They don't come as high as we do. We have
Really?
no Hispanics. We have 1% Latin American population. It's as white as snow. We do have African American population that helps give us some balance, but it's a long ways to go in terms of Hispanics, and we do have a decent Asian population, partly because of all the universities here. 7 universities in the city. But yeah, great place to live, fantastic place. The landscape. Most people who have never been here wouldn't realize just how hilly a place Pittsburgh is. Of course, the fun fact is there are no hills in Pittsburgh, only valleys. This is an eroded plateau.
I know, as somebody who grew up in upstate New York in the foothills of the Catskill Mountains and then spent a lot of time in the flatlands of Alabama and Florida, when I moved up here, it took me about 3 years to get used to the hills again on my bicycle. It was brutal because when I lived in Florida, the idea of a hill was you found the interstate entrance ramp, and that's what your hill repeats were.
The little bridge.
The little bridge.
Little bridge or ramp. My buddy lives in Miami Beach half the year and spends his time with Pittsburgh. Says the same thing. That's his hill training in Miami Beach, is climbing a ramp. But yeah, the hills here are profound. I mean, every tiny little stream has a 300-foot deep ravine with roads on both sides and lots of hills. So at first they're an obstacle. It's like, oh my God, I'm going to die. And then you realize, oh, I'm not going to die. And wow, I'm getting stronger and faster and healthier. And where's the next hill? Where's the bigger hill? Where's the steeper hill? So you have all kinds of neat challenges around Pittsburgh just to embrace the hills. There's the Dirty Dozen bike race, Thanksgiving weekend. Links together 13 of the steepest hills in Pittsburgh into an all-day ride. Very social, very fun, very challenging. And the training for that is just to realize that you're not going to perish after you summit that hill.
I know Hell on Hills is a 5K in Beachview every fall where they run up Canton Avenue, which is one of the hills of the Dirty Dozen. And I believe the step track on most years climbs another hill on the south side slopes. So there are hills, and then there are hills that you look at them and go, this, even though it's very short, is unbelievable.
They look like walls. Some of these hills, like on Route 28 at the 31st Street Bridge, you look up what we call Pig Hill, which is Rialto Street, and it looks like a wall. It looks like I can't walk up that, let alone bike it. Guess what? The body learns how to do these things. That's what we do. We train our bodies to do a little bit more each time, and then it all becomes easy.
I'm interested. Clearly, you are an outdoor mover in a variety of ways, and from interviewing people for FitLabPGH, I found that you can divide people who move as adults into 2 categories. Those who kind of found it in adulthood or during college. Maybe they really enjoyed the college experience for a year or 2 and then said, ooh, I need to do something. Or maybe they enjoyed the lifestyle as a professional for a few years and then realized, ooh, I can't do what I did when I was 20. Or there's the people who basically from when they were kids, either mom and dad took them camping, took them mountain biking, took them hiking, or mom and dad said, get the heck out of the house and move. I don't want to see you back until dinner time. So I'm curious, Sean, were you the active from a kid, or were you found this in either college or adulthood?
Yeah, active from a kid. Active as a kid. Early on, my dad would take my brother and I canoe camping on the Allegheny River, a couple hours north of Pittsburgh. Actually, it's more like an hour and a half from Pittsburgh. Franklin to Kennerdell was a classic trip. You camp on these islands. It's absolute paradise up there. Still one of my favorite things to do. One of the best things to do around Pittsburgh is to canoe camp. It's like backpacking, but you don't have to carry your stuff. It's
and you can bring more stuff that's good for the campfire.
Oh, you can bring anything you want. Big coolers full of tasty steaks and beers and all the toys. It all fits into the canoe. Kayaks are great if you need to travel long distance fast. But if you want to take a lot of stuff, you pack that canoe chock full and just stop on the islands along the way. It's gorgeous.
And we were talking before we started recording. You went to Allegheny College, got a degree in biology, and we were kind of joking that when you get a degree from a liberal arts college, essentially you're not qualified to do anything other than go to grad school. And you made the comment that I was a bio major and I hated the lab, which is kind of interesting. When I went for my doctoral studies, one of the options was more basic research on the bench with dogs. And I knew like 20 seconds in, I don't want to do this. So you finished with a biology degree. How did you get into what you're doing now? And what were your parents' impressions when you said, yeah, I'm really not going to be a biologist?
Well, so yeah, the love of nature, the active outdoor lifestyle, even as a kid, took me right into biology as a major. And I think I wanted to be Jacques Cousteau, one of these wonderful researchers you see swimming with whales and studying creatures. But yeah, sure enough, being a biologist requires a lot of repetitive, tedious activity. Maybe more of an attention span than I was blessed with. To basically pipette tiny microliters over and over and over out of little tubes into another tube, and it wasn't my cup of tea. At Allegheny, they make you do a comprehensive project as a senior, and I realized I like the writing up of the research, but the actual research is dull as dirt, And so senior year, I discovered the English department. Also discovered something called technical writing as a field. I'm like, oh wow, I can dive into technical subjects, biology and whatnot, and communicate it instead of actually perform the research. I'm in. But like you said, I come out of Allegheny College, liberal arts degree. I was like, well, I can think for food, I can write, I can analyze. Not qualified to do anything. So, did my time in the labs, made a living. I think $13,500 was my first salary. Talked them up from $12,000. Felt good about that. But South Oakland, you can live on $13,500 and drink a lot of beer nonetheless. So, took a couple years. Ended up at UPMC. They had CMU tuition reimbursement. Went there, got the master's degree in technical writing. Changed my life. I was at Carnegie Mellon for one semester, and I was like, I can work in this field. That's how application-based that university is. So, but that was the tech bubble, right? So I got vacuumed in by the information technology field, and I ended up writing manuals for engineering and computer applications, software. The quality of life was great. I was traveling in Costa Rica a couple times a year, freelancing with a laptop. But the subject matter, it was, again, dull as dirt. So our company went public, and I was still unenthused, and I finally asked my question. I think I was, 35. I'm not sure how old I was exactly, but what would my dream job be? And it wasn't being a technical writer in the computer industry. So people said, say yes to things that are closer to your passions. I did reading groups in deep ecology just to meet some people. I volunteered for the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy as a land steward. I was like, I get to go hiking and learn about specific conservation areas. And
people are going to ask, what the heck is a land steward?
A land steward was a role. So, as a land trust, you are legally obligated to monitor your properties. That's one of the things you have to do. So you acquire a 100-acre chunk of woods. That's not the end of it. You have to monitor it at least annually, document the conditions of it, and basically take care of that property. So I was a volunteer land steward. I was the eyes and the ears of the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy for a tract of land up near Tionesta.
And I'm curious, who says that you have to monitor? Is this because I'm assuming there are tax implications for having this?
Excellent guess.
So there's forms that you have to fill out?
That's exactly right. So you're a landowner, and you say, okay, I want to donate 100 acres of woods and get a nice tax deduction, for the contribution. Well, the IRS doesn't want that just to be a ploy for money. They want you to actually make sure that land is being protected, just like the tax implications require. So as a land trust, you're legally able to hold that land, but you have to show that you're taking care of it. So I met a fellow named Mike Schiller, fellow land steward, volunteer land steward, and we got to know each other. He was a mountain climber. I was a mountain biker. He taught wilderness first aid. I was a big fisherman. We had a lot of complementary passions in terms of the outdoors. And he said, "Listen, I've got a grant proposal into the Richard King Mellon Foundation, and if this proposal comes through, I'm going to be starting something called the Western Pennsylvania Field Institute." This was in year 2001. And Pittsburgh was not an outdoorsy place then. People thought if you stuck your hand in the river, you would pull it out and it would just be a skeleton. Don't touch the water. Don't go anywhere near it. There were not all these bike trails around. There were parks. We had lots and lots of parks. That was the one raw ingredient that existed. And of course, the terrain was fantastic. But people did not think of it as an outdoorsy place, even if you lived here. People had terribly low self-esteem about Pittsburgh back then. They would meet somebody from another state who had moved here, and they'd be like, why'd you come here? Like, that was literally the attitude. So Mike had this vision, let's take these raw ingredients of the Pittsburgh area, Western Pennsylvania, and show off all the wonderful natural assets. And of course, that's what I was already doing with lots of friends, taking people hiking, taking people biking, canoe camping, fishing, and so on. I love that. So it was a natural fit. So Western Pennsylvania Field Institute started in 2001. It gradually got a better name. Try saying either WPFI, like, oh, is that a radio station? Or Western Pennsylvania Field Institute. Say that 100 times a day. It gets pretty old. So it became Venture Outdoors. We took on the name of our event called the Venture Outdoors Festival, much more intuitive and so on. So it did that for, I think, 8 years. 8 years, yeah. Grew it, established Kayak Pittsburgh. Again, people are like, what? You're going to rent kayaks in Pittsburgh? You can't go in that water. Now they're doing 40,000 people a year. Kayak Pittsburgh. I mean, that's generating a huge amount of revenue for Venture Outdoors as a social enterprise. Social enterprise, some people may know, is a mission-oriented revenue generation. So it's a mechanism that a charity can actually raise money for themselves, make their operations sustainable. So that was a big phase for me. That was my entry into the nonprofit world. Around 2010, we set the world record for the largest flotilla of canoes and kayaks. Had Guinness come in to certify it and the whole thing.
And how many was that?
How many was it? It's in terms of number of boats, and I think it was 1,610 kayaks and canoes gathered at the point. And one more step, you have to hold on to each other's boats, because a flotilla, and came in terms of a storm comes in, the stability comes from holding on to each other's boats so you can flex with the waves and the wind and all that. So we set it, and I don't know if it's online anymore. There's a time-lapse video called Paddle at the Point, and it was so brilliant. A huge rainstorm came in right when we set the record. They blew the horn on the Gateway Clipper boat, and it was official. And then everybody tore off for safety because there was a giant thunderstorm came right in. But we set the world record. It was a brilliant moment for the city, going from zero to hero in terms of outdoorsy progress. And I needed something new to do, so I went to River Life. River Life Task Force was the original name. Sustainable Riverfront Development. It's basically an economic development organization. They argue for a wider buffer zone on the rivers. Their classic victory was when PNC Park was built. They were going to build it right on the river. Well, River Life and others helped push that back 10, 20 yards so you can have the riverfront trail come past it. Now it's just a major resource, major amenity. So I did that for a year and a half or so, and then I ended up in where I think the rubber meets the road, which is land conservation. So 6 years ago, Hollow Oak Land Trust was, kind of a flickering little remnant of something. Not many people had ever heard of it. It was out near the airport. They were at that time they were sort of old school conservation. We're going to protect land for the creatures and for the, but not for people. My predecessor was that old school kind of leader. My first act was to remove a giant pile of railroad ties that was keeping people out of Montour Woods Conservation Area, because people would drive down there and dump trash, dump window frames and stuff. So she was trying to keep that, minimize that, but she was also keeping anybody from entering the woods, unless you had an ATV and you had some kind of way down a hill from your backyard. Those are the only people using the woods.
So a land trust, is this if I own 200 acres near where you are, do I donate the land to you, or do I agree not to develop it and let you be a steward of it? How does that work?
There's a range of options you have as a landowner. You can donate it, either for tax purposes or just for humanitarian purposes. But there's all kinds of ways you can stand to benefit financially as well. You can sell your land. We do land trusts and conservancies purchase land sometimes. It's a really high quality chunk of green space. Maybe it protects a special stream or special species, or for some reason it has extraordinary value. We raise money to do that and acquire land. So literally selling land. Sometimes someone will make a bargain sale. They're like, hey, listen, I need to raise $20,000. I need to put a garage on my house or something. Maybe it's worth $100,000. But they're able to write the difference off in terms of taxes and yet still raise some money. And the land trust gets property at a lower value, lower cost. The third option is a conservation easement. So you've got a 100-acre farm. You want to keep owning it. You want to pass it on to your heirs, but you don't want your heirs to divide it up and build condos on it or whatever those rapscallions get in their head. So you can basically say, we want to own our land, but we never plan to mine it, drill it, log it. We want to keep it as part farm, part woods. It has conservation value. There's a beautiful stream on it, high quality. Let's put a conservation easement on it. So out in Chippewa Township in Beaver County, for example, the Solly family had a 90-acre chunk of property, and they wanted to donate it to the township, but they were afraid they might put soccer fields on it and cut the trees down and take away that natural character of it that they always enjoyed. So what they did is they donated the conservation easement to Hollow Oak Land Trust. So we hold the land easement, the conservation easement of it, and the easement, people are familiar with the utility easements. It's perpetual. Right, it travels with the deed. If you sell your property and Duquesne Light has a utility easement across it, they will always have the ability to go through and trim and clear their power lines. Same thing with a conservation easement. Somebody sells that farm, the conservation easement continues to exist, and we have to go monitor it annually to make sure those restrictions are retained.
So it's a bad thing if you show up at one of these and there are condos that have gone up that were supposed to be in an easement.
It gets real complicated then. And that's one of the challenges of a land trust. You're supposed to have money in the bank for legal defense so that you can hire lawyers and correct that situation.
We were talking a little bit before we recorded, and you mentioned that there are a number of land trusts all around Pittsburgh. With Hollow Oak Land Trust, is there a specific area of Pittsburgh that you are involved with? I know you said you're out by the airport, way out there.
Way out there, yeah. The place people only go to fly. I'm a city guy. I've lived in the city of Pittsburgh my entire adult life, even though that's not where I grew up. Quality of life is worth every penny of taxes I pay. Have never considered moving out of the city. The parks are incredible. The amenities are incredible. However, Moon Township, that's where our focus is because of the airport corridor. The airport corridor is that whole expanse between downtown Pittsburgh and the airport. 27 years ago now, our founders realized, wow, the sprawl was rampant. They were developing as fast as they could, putting malls up, housing plans. Basically, every flat space was cleared and paved. And so they're like, we better save some of this green space before it's all gone. So that was the inspiration. That's why our office is out in Moon Township. A lot of our land is in Moon Township. But we own land throughout the airport area. And that's our focal area, is the airport corridor. It's incredibly hilly in Moon Township, by the way. My joke is it's so hilly that the Ohio River goes around it. If you look at a map, it goes north and then south. It is incredibly hilly. Every stream valley has giant hillsides full of wildlife. Hemlock trees, eastern hemlock trees. I always thought those only lived in the mountains. No, Moon Township was full of them. Rhododendrons, wild mountain laurel, all kinds of streams, all kinds of stuff like that. So interesting place. So and yet it's a challenge, right? Because it's so sprawl oriented. But in modern day, people have realized that, and developers and planners, urban planners have realized that people who work and live in an area also want to go out and play outdoors in that same area. So old school was you either conserve land or you develop it. Nowadays, it's like, if we conserve land, it'll make it more developable. Because the people who live there, out near the airport, lots of corporations, big companies, those people want to go mountain biking. They want to walk their dog. They want to go for a run after work. Or they just want to sit next to a stream and let that stress peel away. So the land trust is no longer an anti-conservation entity so much as an economic catalyst.
And right now, how many acres are in the Hollow Oak Land Trust?
So we have 6 different conservation areas, about 650 acres. Big emphasis right now is greenways. How do we link green space? Not just protect attractive woods or a stream valley, but how do we link that to a nearby park? How do we link our own conservation areas? So one of our biggest projects is the Montour Woods Greenway. Okay, we've got 300 acres at one end of the greenway. It's right off the Montour Trail. So obviously connect to the Montour Trail, United States' longest suburban bike trail, by the way. Link the Montour Trail through the conservation area to a large park called Moon Township Park, and then continue down another stream valley to an 88-acre tract we just acquired last year called the Trout Run Conservation Area, and that's by the Montour Trail. So you get a 10-mile loop out of the process. And these loops are incredibly important. A lot of townships have little parks. Unless you're 3 years old or you're playing baseball, not a whole lot of attraction there. But if you can link complexes of small parks, you essentially get a big park as a result.
And I know people are going to wonder, when they're linked, are they linked with dirt roads, with paved trails, with things that look like golf fairways?
Fair question. Yes. How do you connect the dots? The city parks, Pittsburgh City Parks are incredible. Allegheny County parks are incredible. None of them connect to anything. Conservation areas, privately held conservation areas, oftentimes don't connect to anything. If you want to go for a hike or a bike ride, you generally have to drive to do it. So how do you connect them? That's the question. You can put a bike lane in. That sometimes is very difficult and very expensive and requires lots of traffic engineering. Definitely an option in the toolkit, but the least expensive, the easiest way is to simply build a trail through the stream valley that is always there. Everyone has a stream valley out their backyard. There are stream valleys everywhere in Pittsburgh. It is an eroded plateau. This has been eroding since the last ice age. When those glaciers melted, things got deep, right? Every little stream created a valley. So there's always a green valley that was probably too steep to be developed. And so there's very great opportunity to build what we call sustainable trails, natural surface trails to connect a park, a conservation area, not just to each other, but to residential areas, to business districts, so that you can just walk. That's the idea. You can just walk into the woods. There are woods everywhere. Pittsburgh, one of the best attributes of this place is how green it is. It is lush. We've got lots of rainfall, lots of vegetation, lots of stream valleys. Those stream valleys are literally the next frontier for Pittsburgh's quality of life in terms of connecting things.
I want to talk a little bit more about sustainable trails with you, but before that, I was fortunate enough to get your email newsletter this morning while I was sitting in my Jeep waiting to come into the coffee shop. And it struck me that the Hollow Oak Land Trust is a little bit different from other land trusts in various parts of the country that I've come across. At least I think it is, and maybe you can comment on this. I noticed that not only do you allow mountain biking, but you also allow hunting, which I know, having grown up in upstate New York, very commonly when somebody has a land trust, it's kind of like, it's a land trust, don't hike on it, don't bike on it, don't hunt on it, and basically stay the hell off of it. And that is definitely not what I saw in the newsletter. There were nature hikes, there were mountain bike rides, there was specific hunting times. So is that normal for Western Pennsylvania, or is that something that when the Hollow Oak Land Trust started, it's like, okay, we want to do this a little bit differently so everybody can use the land?
When you said that, I couldn't help but laugh, because you got to laugh instead of cry, right? It's so frustrating sometimes how slow people are to adapt. People, humans. That is yesterday's angle of don't hunt, don't allow mountain biking. Mountain bikers have gone from like ne'er-do-well yahoos to some of the best land stewards around, because they really care. They really treasure their access to nature. And they are the biggest proponents of sustainable trails, really low impact trails. They don't need something that looks like a road in the woods. They just need a skinny little, beautiful little strip of trail that passes through the woods, climbs hills, does not require flat terrain. Pittsburgh, you might have noticed, is not very flat. So mountain bikers are a really active outdoor group. They're incredibly energetic volunteers. And they really care. So we've embraced them as a resource, as a volunteer resource. The hunting, again, absolutely critical. If you care about nature, you have to hunt. I read this most fantastic book last year called Where the Wild Things Were. Stolzberg, I think, is the author from West Virginia. And it uses examples from all over the world, several from the United States, some from right here in western Pennsylvania, of where when you take out the carnivore, the predator in a system, the ecosystem collapses. Without something to control those herbivores. Herbivores are made to reproduce, to keep up with the predation. That's the whole natural system. So you remove predators, wolves, mountain lions, and that sort of thing, because they tend to eat people.
Coyotes.
Coyotes don't eat people. And they don't eat nearly enough deer. We have lots of coyotes. People ask me, what are you going to do about the coyote problem? I'm like, what are you talking about? They're part of the solution. They offer no harm to people. They only do good. If you let your pets run wild, feral cats and stuff, they'll eat them.
I mentioned coyotes because I have a huge number of deer. I live on a little bit over 4 acres, and my neighbor found a deer that had, let's put it this way, passed on, and he had also saw a coyote enjoying a snack.
Oh, yeah, they love carrion. During hunting season, they feast on the gut piles that hunters live. That's a pretty gross phrase, but it's what you do. You don't want to carry that giant deer out for a mile, right? So they clean the deer or gut it or whatever you call it. I'm not a big hunter, but they leave that tasty pile of innards that the coyotes will munch up.
So the purpose of allowing the hunting is to essentially encourage wildlife so that the in perpetuity means that 50 years from now there will still be wildlife there of a variety.
It's the plants. It's about the plants. If you have too many deer, they will eat the plants to the ground. There are native species of cow, and it's what they're made to do. They will sniff out those tasty little shoots and the new little seedling trees, and they will eat them to the ground if there are too many. Some consumption of plants is very good too, but you need something to reduce the deer population, because a deer population can double in 2 years. If every doe gets pregnant, 2 to 3 fawns per doe, and one happy little buck can impregnate a whole bunch of does.
I know there's a doe on my property that had 3 little fawns. Yeah. I see them.
Cute little triplets. I mean, they are darling. I do not hate deer. I love deer. But too many deer, too many of anything is a problem, right? Too many people, too many deer, too many coyotes. The thing about predators, and coyotes are not pure predators. They're omnivores. They'll eat mice, they'll eat berries, but they will definitely snack on creatures they can catch. But my understanding is a fawn is actually too fast in one week, age of 1 week, too fast for us to catch. If you want to tag it for research purposes, it's probably too fast for a coyote to easily catch also, because don't forget, mom's there to kick its ass. So the coyotes are not controlling the deer population. So we absolutely need to have hunting. I'd like to see more municipal parks allow some form of hunting. Something that's safe for visitors. Archery. Archers are sort of the fly fishermen of the hunting world. They're very careful. They're very, very, very cautious, and they have to get really close to kill a deer. So it's really the safest possible. The other thing is if you hunt out of a tree stand, you're shooting downward, so it doesn't carry so far. So you're not shooting a bullet that can carry a mile. You're shooting right into the ground. So we do have an active deer hunting program. We do not charge for that. People come to our office, get a permit, and they really are an important part of our wildlife management program.
And I think you hit on this a few minutes ago, either consciously or unconsciously. You said the problem with too many deer is they eat everything. And I think that's a great transition into, I know, something that's one of your passions and one of your big areas of interest is sustainable trail building. So I would assume that if the deer eat everything down to the ground and then it rains, there's going to be a lot of erosion, which is not a good thing. So this is your opportunity to talk a little bit about the difference between just building trails and building sustainable trails that help maintain that land trust and make it usable land rather than just a sea of mud in the rainy season, or this year, pretty much all summer long.
Yeah, summers have gotten wet around here. Ben, you're a good interviewer. You keep us moving. A lot of these topics you can just dive into and never come out. But sustainable trails really the interface between conservation, wildlife, habitat management, and people. The usage factor. How do people get out there to enjoy these woods in really gnarly terrain? Pittsburgh's not a flat place. So to build a trail in hilly terrain used to be, hey, you just drive the tractor straight down the hill, cut a few trees down and call it done. Well, what happens to that trail over time is it becomes highly eroded, right? That nice, happy little layer of soil goes away little bit by little bit every time it rains. And so what you're left with is deep crevices and rocks that roll when you step on them, and roots that are exposed. And what happens to all that dirt? It pours into the stream at the bottom of the hill, right? So it suffocates those little creatures that make that stream so healthy. Without the creatures, they can't really process the nutrients that come in, and so the stream provides less ecological services. So the answer is sustainable trails. Sustainable trails kind of have three dimensions to them. One is they use natural surfaces. You don't need to pave a trail. You don't even need to put limestone or crushed gravel on it. In Western Pennsylvania, we're blessed with the ideal composition of soil and rock and clay, so that if you design a trail right, it will weather perfectly for years and years. Just look at a deer trail. Back to the deer. Deer have excellent sense of sustainable trails. You rarely find a deer trail that goes straight up and down a hill. They always work the contour line across the hill. They're just taking their time. They're browsing. They just want to take their time. They want to run away from a predator. They like those sneaky little trails that just follow the contour. A lot of times I'll cheat and I'll follow a deer trail if I want to put a trail in, because they have excellent sense of terrain. That's the first part is the contour trail, right? You go across the side of a hill. You don't go straight down. And we call that the half rule. You never want a trail that's steeper than half the grade of the slope. Okay, so if the slope is, say, 10%, going straight up and down, you don't want the trail to be any more than 5%. If it is more than that, it will capture rain. The rain will not leave your trail. It'll ruin it. And not only is it bad ecologically, but people don't enjoy it because it's straight up and down. It becomes really eroded. It takes a lot to maintain it. So if you design a trail that's sustainable, minimal maintenance, right? Everybody's fantasy. I just met yesterday with the Riverview Park foreman in the city and explained to him that if we redesign the trails in Riverview Park, it'll take less maintenance. He's got like 40 parks under his care now. So his guys are not spending much time in the park's trails, and they're terrible. They're in terrible shape, but mainly because they were originally designed improperly. So there's two dimensions. One is that half roll, right? You don't want a steep trail. You go across the contour. If you've got to climb a hill, you basically do a little switchback. And then you come back across the hill and you do a little switchback. So people hardly even notice they're climbing. Next thing you know, you've climbed 100, 200 feet vertical, but it took you a mile to do it. So it makes it more appetizing. The second one is that trail tilts outward just a little bit, 5% outslope. If it's inslope like a road, there's no gutter there to catch it. It's just dirt, and so it will erode. So you build that, you bench cut. You cut into the hillside. You make this little trail, maybe 20 inches, 24 inches wide. It's not like a big rail trail, but you tilt it outward. You leave a little bit of tilt. So when it rains, that rain comes across the trail and drains off of your trail. The geeky phrase is laminar sheet flow. You want that rain to sheet across your trail, not pick up speed, not form a gully, but just sheet across and off into the foliage where it makes them happy, makes those plants happy.
It would be correct to say that if the trail goes straight up and down, there's not going to be laminar sheeting. It's going to be
cascading.
Waterfalls
and trails, not the same thing. They're very beautiful. Don't want to walk up them. I mean, unless you're a rock climber or someone really adventurous, not the average person. We're trying to build sustainable trails are basically something that can handle a lot of people with little maintenance. Not just the extreme, adventurers, the people who want to sprint straight up hills. We've got lots of really steep hills around here. You want to get a workout, go for it. In fact, to segue into the active lifestyle, hills are medicinal. Around Pittsburgh, it might be an obstacle, but it can make your life so much better because you don't really. If you walk or bike up hills, you can shorten your workout. Instead of having to go for a 3-hour bike ride on the flat, rail trail, you can go for a 30-minute walk, and your heart is going, and your heart is getting stronger, and you're breathing harder, and it's medicinal, literally good for you. You need to stop and take a break. Stop and take a break. Next day, you'll find it easier and easier to go up those hills. So it's good for the body and good for the mind.
We're talking with Sean Brady. He is the director of the Hollow Oak Land Trust. I think he's got an important mission to remember that land trusts are for everybody. They're just not for walkers, hikers, fishermen, etc. It's for everybody so that they will exist in perpetuity. And I think the key point that he hit on there that everybody should be aware of is be aware of the terrain and also the environmental conditions. So if you notice that a trail is really, really muddy, stay off the trail and pick another trail. Sean, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to FitLabPGH. I think the Hollow Oak Land Trust is doing a great thing, and you certainly fit the ethos of FitLab Pittsburgh movement. It's part of what makes your life complete.
Great to be with you, Ben. Thanks a bunch. Keep up the good work. We need to get this word out that Pittsburgh's a fit place, and there's so many things to do around here.
Thanks for listening to the latest episode of FitLabPGH, brought to you by Moving to Live. Intro and exit music is Marathon Man by Jason Shaw. Check out the show notes for contact info for our latest guests, links to other information mentioned in the episode, and links to our sister podcast, Moving to Live. Moving to Live is a podcast about movement and exercise for professionals and amateur aficionados. Moving to Live offers topics from career development to coaching tips and education resources to advice for parents of student athletes. You can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or Google Play, or check out our website for other subscription options. Your free subscription gets you notified when we release a new episode. Questions, comments, suggestions? Email us at fitlabpgh@gmail.com or follow us on Twitter and Instagram at fitlabpgh and like us on Facebook. If you enjoy our podcasts, please tell your friends about us and consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts. Make FitLabPGH a go-to place to learn more about movement in the Pittsburgh area. Until next time, keep on moving.